No, you don't have to move the mountain. You can climb it, as the song says, or you can go around it, or you can, as I did 2 weeks ago on the ski slopes of Colorado, you can simply fall on it. Yes, I fell while skiing 10 days ago. And however, rumors of my demise have been muchly exaggerated. As you can see, I am perfectly fine. But there is a good story, so I'm going to tell it to you anyway. So the first challenge for Brian and me, who are not really skiers, he's a better skier than I am, was simply to master the ski lift, which we did. You know, the first time, of course, I fell face forward, and the lady had to stop the ski lift and come down and lift me up to get me going again. But the next few times, I never fell again off the ski lift. Once I learned that you're not supposed to lean backwards, you're supposed to lean forward and just trust. You go right off the ski lift. It's just like a dream. So once I got over the ski lift, and once we went up and down the bunny slope there at the lodge a few times, we did that about 4 or 5 times. We were feeling pretty confident. So we decided to take the big ski lift up to the top of the mountain. Yeah. So we got to the top of the mountain. Not to worry, you know, we were still going to be coming down green slopes. Those are the easier slopes, and that was our plan. And sure enough, got off the big ski lift just fine too, and we had just started down this beautiful, nice, easy slope, and I was gently kind of traversing to one side and then to the other. I was feeling so comfortable. Not a care in the world, not a fear in the world. It was just feeling really, really easy, easier than I ever dreamed it would be. And so then as I start to go back, I look over and there's this tree over there on the edge of the run. And it was like a mythological siren calling me. And I called back. I said, "Tree." I really did. I said it 3 times. I remember distinctly. I said, "Tree." And I thought, you know, this is just like ice skating. I'll just kind of go over to the tree. I'll just grab hold of it and stop and pause for a minute. Okay, you guys who are skiers know it doesn't work that way, but I didn't know it worked that way. I could have turned back, but I thought, no, I'll just go over to this pretty tree. I'm just going to grab hold of it. But what I didn't know is that, first of all, I was going a little faster than I thought. I mean, I must have been going 1.5 miles an hour instead of 1 mile an hour. But so grabbing the tree didn't really stop me. But what happens is there's deeper snow on the edge. So your skis go vroom. Okay, that's vroom. Right into the snow. And then they're stuck. You ain't moving. They are stuck. So the only thing you can do, because by now the tree is past you, you cannot grab the tree anymore, is fall. But because my skis were stuck, I didn't exactly fall what you would call gracefully. And so my leg and knee were rather contorted, let's just say that. And here's how I know they were contorted in ways that your leg and your knee are not supposed to be. First of all, well, the pain did kind of give it away. It hurt really, really bad. We're just going to laugh about it because it hurt really, really bad. And then Brian, whom I'm calling to by now, notices what's happened. He comes over, and I can see in his eyes that all is not well. He does not say what we're both thinking. He does not say, "Oh my God, your leg is broken. Oh my goodness, legs don't grow that way." But his eyes, I'm afraid, gave him away. So you know the end of the story. You know that I am fine. And in the midst of all of this, it took a while for us to realize that my skis had not come off. Skis are supposed to come off, but I didn't fall in a way to make them come off. So as long as my ski was buried one way and my leg was turned the other, there was a lot of pain. But once we figured that out and got the ski off, then the ski patrol came, and I got to ride down the hill on one of those little sleds. This very sweet young man looked me in the eye and says, "It's going to be okay." He says, "Travis is the best ski puller, or the best sled puller we have." Sled puller? Really? So they put my leg in a brace and they put me in this thing, and I am praying the prayer for protection all the way down that mountain, And poor Brian, this is his first run of the day too, you understand. He's got to come down by himself. Anyway, all was well. I'm good, and I now know. And somebody said to me earlier they would help me get over my fear of skiing. I have no fear now. Really, it was a lot easier than I thought. I just didn't know you don't go off into the deep snow on the edge. I didn't know that. So now that I know, I'm ready to go back. Thank you, by the way, Byron and Mary Beth, because it was their condo that I stayed in. I bid on it at the Fall Faith this last fall, and it was the perfect ski slopes for beginners if they only had a little bit of common sense. That's all. So the story fits into today in a couple of ways. You see, the Bible talks a lot about mountains. Mountains are symbolic of a high state of consciousness. And Jesus talked about mountains as it related to faith. And you'll remember, perhaps, that after a couple of different miracles that he performed, he would talk about faith, and two in particular talked about mountains. There was a boy who would have seizures. And back then, people thought seizures were evidence of some sort of demonic possession or what have you. And so the disciples tried to heal this boy of his seizures, to rid him of the demon inside. But they weren't successful. So the father brought his son to Jesus, who, of course, did his thing, healed the boy. The demon left. And the disciples were like, how come you could do it? We've been watching you. How come you could do it and we couldn't? And here's that famous line that you've heard before. In the book of Matthew 17, Jesus says, because of your little faith. For truly I tell you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. There's another passage further on in Matthew where Jesus has just performed another miracle and with a fig tree, and the disciples ask him again, now, how did you do that? And again he says, truly I tell you, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only will you do what has been done to the fig tree, but even if you say to this mountain, be lifted up and thrown into the sea, it will be done. Whatever you ask for in faith, you will receive. What if the mountain doesn't move? What if you pray and study and come to church and do all the right things that Reverend Eileen has been telling you to do? And you get over to the mountain and you try to lift that sucker and it just doesn't move. Now, we're studying faith this month as part of our 12-month series. Our series this year is Living the Empowered Life. Each month, we explore a different quality of being to help us live the truly empowered life. Empowered as in accepting, claiming, and knowing the Christ in us. So faith is very important in that. And we have an affirmation that I'd like us to speak together, which is our affirmation for the month of February here. Together, I live with an abiding faith in my oneness with God. An abiding faith. That means the faith lives in you all the time. It's with you all the time. So you never lose that faith. And oneness with God, you know, to me that's the essence of faith, is knowing that God is there all the time, no matter where you are and what's happening and how big the mountain is in front of you. I live with an abiding faith in my oneness with God. And I picked this particular photograph to go with that affirmation because it's a sunset, and we can count on the sun, right? We can count on the sun to set every day and to rise every day. And we know it doesn't really set and rise, but that's what it looks like, and we can count on that, right? We can count on that to happen. Some days it's cloudier than others, and there's just a little light that comes, but it gets lighter in the daytime and darker at night, and we can depend on that like we can depend on God, the creator that set the universe in motion in the first place. So faith is this abiding knowledge that we are one with God all the time, all the time. And yet sometimes, well, we don't feel it. And we have challenges and they don't seem to go away. I was listening to an interview on the radio the other day with a woman by the name of Janet Sims Wood, who's 67 years old. And she says she calls herself the faith lady. Now, Janet's had her share of mountains to deal with. Her husband died, she had breast cancer, and now she's 67 and had been planning to be retired by now. However, she lost her retirement savings, and so she's still working. She figures she'll just keep on working. And when the interviewer asked her about that, she said, "I'm known as the faith lady. I have faith that things will work out. I don't care how bad they are. It's going to work out," she says. "You just keep moving. You do not stop, because you can get depressed and go home and sit down, and the next thing you know, you're gone. Stay positive. We have to stay positive." And staying positive is really important. And we talk a lot about that in Unity because we know the law of mind action. You know, what we think about grows. So if we focus on the big mountain in front of us, it just gets bigger, right? Instead, we want to focus on solution or whatever other positive thought there might be. So Unity does talk a lot about positive thinking, and that does support your faith. It absolutely does. But sometimes I think that there are contradictions in the spiritual laws. Well, no, I shouldn't say it that way. The spiritual laws seem contradictory because there's this other law called the law of surrender. And this law of surrender says, yes, you set your vision very clearly and you think those thoughts about that vision and that intention, but there's also a time when you have to let go of attachment. You have to let go of attachment of exactly what it looks like. You have to, because sometimes the mountain that doesn't seem to be moving in your life, well, it may be that you're so attached to a particular vision you can't even see that it has moved. Let me give you an example. Now, I think I've got two amazing daughters, and I think that any college in the whole world should want to have them there. However, it wasn't the case when they applied to colleges. No, their first choices didn't want anything to do with them. And in fact, for my youngest daughter, Amanda, her first several choices did not admit her, but her backup school did. Backup school. She didn't want to go to her backup school. Now, most people would be just pleased to get into college, but she did not want to go to Texas Christian University. That was not at the top of her list. But they were the ones that admitted her. So she went to school. But she went to school kind of like I did with my skis in the snow. You know, her feet were dug in, and she was prepared to hate it. All she could talk about was how she was going to transfer out. Now, that's not to say all the time. She had joy, and she joined organizations, and she did a little this and a little that. But mostly, she was kind of like this. Until roundabout the middle of the second term. And something shifted for her. It just shifted. I'm not sure she could articulate it today. But she did tell me around about that time, I've decided not to dislike it so much. She just decided. And when she decided, all of a sudden she saw all the goodness that was there in her midst. She made a choice to see it differently. And it proved to be a wonderful university for her, a wonderful experience. She wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. Now, as for me, I've got too many horned frogs in the house. Brian's an alumnus of it, and she is as well. So, you know, we got a lot of purple fever going on. Not K-State fever, but purple fever for TCU. But it's fun. It's fun, and it's good. So what I'm saying is sometimes, you know, we're attached to a certain vision, and so we think because it hasn't happened that that's a big mountain that we've got to hurdle, and God's in our way. But the truth is sometimes we have to let go of being so specifically attached. And that's one of the laws that's at work. Sometimes we've just got to realize that things are in the works. You know, maybe you saw that movie, The Best Exotic Marigolds Hotel, where they say that quote about, it'll be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end. Now, I don't say that to minimize what some of you might be going through today, because some of you have very big mountains. I know what those mountains might be for some of you. Maybe the medical test did not come out the way you had hoped. Maybe the person that you love doesn't love you back. Maybe that job that you know was for you was given to someone else. I don't know what your mountain might be, but a mountain here is symbolic of those things in this context that seem immovable in your life, that seem like they're not going to shift, the grief that seems like it will go on forever. There's even what's called the dark night of the soul experience, and it is the depth of despair. But the interesting thing about mountains is that they can seem like they're in our way. But didn't I just say a minute ago that in the Bible, they also represent an elevated state of consciousness? Sometimes as we're figuring out how to climb or go around or fall on the mountain, we are learning and growing and stretching. And that's one of the ways to move through or around your mountain experience. It's to get a different perspective of it. I learned in Colorado as we would drive around that the mountains would shape-shift. Well, for instance, when we first got to our condo, first thing I did was to go look out the view. Well, the day I got there, I saw lots of pretty snow, which at that time I welcomed. Today I would pass on it, but at that time I welcomed it. But I didn't see any mountains. I was just a little bit disappointed. But the next day, mountains grew. It was sunny the next day. I could see them. See, the clouds had covered them before. Brian said God watered the mountains and they grew. Because it snowed overnight, he said they watered the mountains and they grew. Anyway, but, I'm making light of it. But that happened to us the whole trip. We would drive around, mountains would disappear, then they'd reappear. We'd get up really close to one and it would seem huge. And then we'd drive away and it would become smaller. It's like that in life. When the mountain in your life is so big that that's all you can see and you can't see anything else, you can't even see between, you can only see the mountain, it is huge. So sometimes what you want to do is to step back. Maybe literally, maybe you take a trip out of town, just a drive, just 2 hours out of town, can clear your thinking. Or maybe you meditate for an hour. You see, you shift your perspective, you step back from it. And when you step back from it, it can take on a whole different level of power in your life. You get the big picture. You see, we weren't really happy that our skiing was cut short in Colorado. We were not going to go back up on that mountain, even though I wasn't feeling bad. I was feeling a little wonky. That's a medical term. And so we didn't go back up. But I can tell you that that fall was an amazing experience for me and for my husband, Brian. When you almost have something really serious happen, boy, it's like our love for each other just was magnified. My love for life was just intensified. It was a peak experience, actually, a peak experience for me. So you shift your perspective. Sometimes that will change it, and sometimes, the mountain is still there. Emily Cady, who wrote the book Lessons in Truth, it's one of our great foundational unity texts. And she has a whole chapter on faith, and she talks about blind faith and understanding faith. And blind faith is when you just have an intuitive knowing that God is there anyway. In the midst of the challenge, God is there, and you just sort of know that. And I have that blind faith most of the time. And then she says there's an understanding faith. And understanding faith comes from knowing spiritual law and partnering with it. In some ways, that's an even more empowering faith. And understanding faith is what you want to call on when you are really in the depths of despair. Because understanding faith, for instance, says, okay, I know there's the law of mind action, which says I can choose to focus on the positive and that's what will grow. I know there's the law of giving and receiving, which says that as I give, so I can receive. And so I can choose to give, and that can help shift my energy. I know there's a law of attraction that says that what my consciousness is attracts, like a magnet attracts the metal filings that are attracted to it. So I can keep my consciousness in a way that will attract what it is that I seek. And then one of our great Unity ministers, Ed Rabel, used to tell Bob Barth, there's the law of fluke, which says there's mysteries. We don't understand it all. We don't understand it all. Some things just happen. But when you have understanding faith, you work the laws as best you can, and you know that God is there anyway. In the midst of it all, God is there anyway. Our ministerial intern, Charles Perry, was talking to us a couple of weeks ago, and he said, when he really needs to grow his faith, he prays. He said, when I want peace, I meditate. Freedom from anxiety and such. But when I want faith to grow in me, I pray. Many of you have come to Reverend Eileen for prayer. I've been coming to her for prayer since before I ever came here. Many of you have come to our prayer chaplains for prayer. I want to tell you that when I was laying near the tree, I prayed hard and I prayed loud. I called out to Jesus. I called out to God. I don't know what else I said. I've not had the nerve to ask my husband, but I don't think I cursed. I might have. But I know I called out and I prayed hard. And when we got down to the bottom of the mountain, and we got into that kind of the little exam area where the EMTs were examining my leg, the first thing I said to Brian was, text Bob, get him to pray for us. Actually, I told him to text Eileen, but she was on vacation. He couldn't reach either. Couldn't figure out how to make it, at that point, how to do the text because we were in a little stressful place. And as soon as we got back to our condo, the very first call I made was Silent Unity for prayer. We are here to pray with you. Some of you have been staring at a mountain for a while now, and you may stare at it for a while longer. I don't make any promises that it's going to go away today because we talked about faith. But I can promise that we will be here with you. That I can promise. I can promise that if you pray, if you just give yourself to prayer, it will begin to shift. Something will shift. Sometimes it's just one day at a time. I was reading a blog the other day, and this woman talked about faith. And she said, you don't have to believe that you can do it. You don't even have to believe that it ultimately, whatever it is, will happen. All you have to believe is that the Christ can do it. And just hold on to that. And to know that the Christ is in you. You see, when we read about Jesus and the disciples, we can look at it literally and we can look at it for the symbology that they represent, knowing that Jesus represents the Christ that is in you and is in me. And that Christ power can do anything. And so I invite you, even if you can't see your way around the mountain yet, to know that the Christ in you can. that all things are possible through the Christ, the divine spark in you. God bless you.